The sterile lights of medbay 7 hummed with artificial constancy, casting blue-white shadows across the examination table where Cub Kale lay motionless. His massive form, over 3 meters of scaled muscle and obsidian claws, seemed almost peaceful in induced sleep. The sedative cocktail flowing through his veins would have killed a lesser species 3 times over. For an apex-born, it was barely enough. Dr. Ellen Vera stood in the adjacent room, her back pressed against the cold wall, and wept. She had held it together through the evacuation, through the screaming chaos when the Kethran warships breached the colony's shields, through the desperate sprint to the medical frigate with 18 children clinging to her coat. She had held it together when they'd lifted off, leaving thousands behind on a world that would be ash by morning. But then she'd seen him, Private Chen, 19 years old. He'd given her his oxygen mask when the smoke filled the eastern corridor. She'd argued. He'd smiled that crooked smile and said someone needed to make sure the kids made it. His body bag lay on the gurney beside her now. The sound that escaped her throat was raw and animal, grief distilled into its purest form. It carried through the wall, through the recycled air, through the careful distance that military protocol demanded between the living and the dead. In the next room, something stirred. Kale's third eyelid flickered. His primary consciousness remained submerged beneath chemical darkness, but something older, something carved into his DNA across 10,000 generations, recognized that sound. His species had been apex predators since before they'd learned to forge steel or map the stars. They knew prey. They knew threat. This was neither. The heart monitor attached to his thorax registered an anomaly. His secondary pulse quickened, then his primary. The attending xenobiologist, a Talarian named Dr. Vosch, frowned at the readings. Increased the sedative by 0.2%. But Kale was already climbing. Not toward wakefulness, not yet, but toward a state his people called the between, where instinct ruled and ancient purpose overrode biological limitation. Ellen didn't hear the alarms. She was doubled over now, shoulders shaking, making sounds she didn't recognize as her own. Chen had been a terrible chess player. He'd sung off-key in the shower. He'd been teaching the colony kids basic first aid every Sunday evening. He'd died giving her his mask. The wall between the rooms was reinforced titanium ceramic composite, standard military construction, designed to contain everything from explosive decompression to plasma fire. Kale's claws went through it like tissue paper. The sound was catastrophic. Metal shrieking, rivets exploding, debris showering across tile. Ellen's head snapped up just as 3 meters of sedated apex predator crashed through into her room, trailing IV lines and monitoring equipment like grotesque streamers. She should have died. Protocol said so. Every xenobiological text agreed. An apex-born male, even partially sedated, was a kill zone incarnate. Their attack instinct was so refined, so fundamentally woven into their being, that they'd been known to eliminate threats while technically still unconscious. Kale landed on all fours. His eyes, 6 of them arranged in a crown around his skull, were half-lidded and unfocused. Sedative still flooded his system. Behind him, Dr. Vosch was screaming into the comm system. Security would arrive in 30 seconds. The cub wouldn't need 5. He lurched toward Ellen. She pressed back against the wall, tears still streaming down her face, too exhausted for fear. His head lowered until his primary eyes were level with hers. She could smell the ozone and copper. Scent of him, could see the individual scales along his muzzle, each one edged in bioluminescent gold. His breathing was labored. The sedatives were fighting him now, trying to drag him back down. It cost him everything just to remain vertical. And then he did something no apex-born had done in recorded galactic history. He keened. The sound started, low in his thorax and built to a resonance that made the remaining walls vibrate. It wasn't a roar or a threat call. It was mourning, pure and unmistakable, the kind of sound his ancestors had made when they'd lost packmates to the ancient predators of their homeworld. Ellen stopped breathing. Kale's massive head dipped lower. Gently, impossibly gently for claws that could rend starship hull. He nosed the body bag beside her. His keening softened to something that sounded almost like a question. "He's gone," Ellen whispered. Her voice cracked. "He's gone, and I couldn't save him." The cub's eyes focused on her with sudden, perfect clarity. For just a moment, the sedatives lost their grip entirely, and Ellen saw the intelligence behind those alien features. Not human intelligence. Something else. Something older, and perhaps more honest. He pressed his forehead against hers. The gesture was so deliberate, so clearly intentional, that it transcended species. His scales were warm against her skin. His breathing matched hers. "You grieve," the gesture said. "Your grief is witnessed. Your grief is honored." Security burst through the door, weapons raised. "Doctor, step away. Stand down." Ellen's voice carried authority she didn't know she possessed. "Stand down now." The team leader hesitated. Every instinct, every training protocol screamed at him to fire. But the human doctor was still alive, and the Apex-born, sedated to the point of death, having literally broken through walls, was pressing his head against hers in what could only be called tenderness. Cale held the position for 5 more seconds. Then, as if satisfied that Ellen understood, he slowly folded his legs beneath him and lay down beside Chen's body. His eyes never left hers. The sedatives finally won. He collapsed into true unconsciousness, but not before his tail curled around the gurney in an unmistakable gesture of protection. Ellen sank down beside him, one hand on his scaled shoulder, the other resting on Chen's body bag. And she wept, but differently now, not alone. 3 hours later, when Cale woke in a reinforced containment cell, he had only fragmented memories of what had occurred. But he remembered the sound, that grief sound. It had reached into the chemical darkness and pulled him toward consciousness like nothing else could have. His handlers told him he'd breached a wall, endangered a human doctor, would face disciplinary review. But they also told him, quietly when the official reports were filed, that Dr. Ellen Vara had submitted testimony declaring he'd shown restraint beyond military expectation, that she'd requested he remain assigned to the medical frigate. That she'd called him Pack. Humans, Cale decided, were the strangest species in the galaxy. They grieved so loudly that it could wake the dead, and somehow, impossibly, that grief could transform a predator into a protector, even through sedation, meant for killing, even across the distance between species. In that moment, Cale understood why humans were spreading across the stars despite being soft and small and fragile. They didn't just survive sorrow, they shared it, and in sharing, they made it holy.